Good evening. Today we're going to be inspired by one of the biggest British dance acts on the planet right now. Girls all over the world will be salivating at his finger skills with those touchpads. It is, of course, Fred again. Alright, let's run it from the top.
Can you turn up a bit more? Thank you. Dance with me, shoulder to shoulder. Never in the world have two others been closer than us. Closer than us. Hold my hand under the table. It's not that I'm not proud in the company of strangers. It's just some things are for us. Lover, you know when they ask me, I'll tell them. Won't be ashamed, no, I can't wait to tell them. Lover, I love her, I love her, I love her, See in her eyes that she's lost in the moment, holding on tight. All that I know is love her, I love her, I love her, I love her. Dance with me, shoulder to shoulder. Never in the world, two others be closer than us. Closer than us. Hold my hand under the table. It's not that I'm not proud in the company of strangers. It's just some things are for us. Some things are for us.
There we have it. So first off, this video obviously isn't a Fred Again drum and bass song like his Everybody, Everybody. This is my imagination of Fred Again's dreamy and happy style house in the style of drum and bass. So first off, we're in A sharp major and we are using a splice loop. And this is how the loop sounded originally. So it's in the same key, we've sped it up quite a lot. I've added some OTT, some decapitator, some CLO vocals. And because in the original sample it has a little percussion hit in there, I've automated that out using the gain on a utility. So we are just ducking to 0 when that little hit comes in. So it has a little bit more control. And when our snares are hitting in the song, they're not getting clouded by this percussion hit in the original loop. So we're in A major, and we can see here from the bass that we're going from the D sharp to the G to the D sharp to the G to the F sharp. And that is the 4th to the 6th to the 4th to the 6th to the 5th. And sometimes I find it's easy to get stuck in the 4-bar loop where you're going maybe from the 1 to the 3rd to the 7th. And this is a really good technique where rather than using 4 different notes in your chord progression, where you return to the first note after your second note has been played. And that happens a lot in a lot of pop music. Stuff like the Beatles and Oasis will do this a lot, where there's a different type of tension is built from going from one note to the next and then back down to that same note again. It adds a slightly different variation and a different resolve to your chord progressions. So if we listen to that by itself. It has a really nice sort of cyclical vibe to the harmony, and it means that you don't get stuck in that traditional 4-chord harmony that you often see in a lot of pop music. So a really distinctive thing that Fred Again does in his tracks is create atmosphere, and I've tried to emulate a similar kind of thing using the effects in this tune. So I've not used a traditional sort of white noise sweeps. We've gone for much more organic sounding effects, and it gives a much more natural vibe to the whole of the song. So there's a mixture of very natural sounds, like this one here, which is like a bird song. And at the same time, quite inorganic and computery sounding sounds, like this one. So it's a blend of those two together, which makes Fred Again's sound so unique. So in this build up, we've just got some quite simple drums, a little break in there, and some kicks. So the drums in themselves are quite traditionally dance sounding, but at the same time, the melodies are quite euphoric and very naturalistic sounding. So you get a really nice balance. So for the snares, I wanted it to have a more unique sound than a traditional sort of 909 snare. So I've layered 3 different snares. So this is them all together. So the first one, it's quite tonal. You can hear there's a note that's being played in there. And then one on top of that is a little bit of a more percussive, a little bit wider, and a little bit more natural sounding. And then the last one is just a little bit of top end and sounds a little bit more like a drum and bass snare that we're used to. So all those together just gives it a little bit more character and a little bit more of a naturalistic sound than maybe we would normally do in a drum and bass song. And I've just got one top doing all of the hi-hats. And as we go into the second section of the drop, I'm introducing some counter melodies that weren't there before. So this is our loop that's going through the first half of the drop. And then I've introduced a few little counter melodies just to add a little bit more complexity to the sort of harmonic structure of the song. We have this one marimba melody. Just doing the same thing again and again, just on the A sharp to the C. And then we have this flute. Just going from the C to the F to the G. And then we have this sustained synth that is just doing the third of each of those bass notes. And all of those together. There's a few layers going on and it's quite complex melodically, and it's easy to overdo these kind of things, but the reason I think this works is because if you listen to it all as one, none of the melodies are getting in the way of each other. They're sort of existing in their own sphere, and if you listen to them all together, it could almost be one loop. And I know it's easy sometimes to layer and layer and layer melodies, and it can sound quite messy a lot of the time. But in this instance, I felt like they were all working symbiotically with each other. So we get into this post here with this little vocal stutter. So this was a sample that I found, I think, on Splice, and this was the original. As you can see, I've taken up 14 semitones, and then I've sped up the sample. And then I've added this LFO rack that I use quite a lot, which is just an LFO tool, effectively. So this LFO tool is just doing rates of 16. So the volume is ducking in and out at the rate of 16ths. And then I've added a little bit of processing, so this OTT and erosion, so without that. So it just adds a little bit more organic sound to it and just crunches it up a little bit. Added a little bit of auto pan on there just to swing it left and right in the stereo field, and then just a little bit of reverb as well. And then to make the glides in the melody a little bit more smooth, I've used a envelope on the clip, transposition, and then we're slowly gliding into the next note rather than it being a sort of static note like this. So we glide in there. It gives it a much more naturalistic feel, and we're doing the same thing going out of that note, and we're just bending back down. So I've just cut this sample up just a little bit to make the melody of the lead. And then as we go into the second half of that post, I've added a little counter melody as well. So it's just the same sample, but without any processing this time, and I've just done a slightly different melody on top of that, just to add another layer of harmonic interest. And then that whole synth group is just being sidechained to the kick with this Fab Filter C2. And I've seen a few people talk about high shelving their synth bus at around 7K because it helps your hi-hats and your vocals cut through a little bit. So I've just done that and I thought it sounded good. So just edge those off just a little bit. So with the bass, to make it a little bit more interesting, I've added these little flicks here. So rather than it just being a straight following the chord progression like this, I've added just a little bit of interest to the rhythm and a little bit of change in the notes as well. So it goes from just a static note to having these little variations in the rhythm, which makes it sound far more like it's being played by a human and gives it a much more naturalistic feel. Just adds to the energy and to the rhythm and just gives it a different dimension rather than it just being a static note that's just following those chords. And then in this transition from the chorus into this post, we've added a little bit of a gap, a little bit of silence, and I think that's really impactful to get you into the next section, because taking stuff out here when everything comes back in again in this section, it feels far more impactful.
Something's a breath. Something's a breath.
And there we are. That is how to make a euphoric, beautiful sounding drum and bass song. I do hope it's helped. Love to your mothers. Thank you.